There was something about Armias Joseph Ascadom, also known as Nipsey Hussle, or even Thundercat by the OGs that knew him. It all dates back to 15th of August 1985, where he'd be born to father DeWitt Ascadom and mother Angelique Smith. Now Hussle had always been, and still remains, one of the most respected icons in the music industry. And if you didn't know this, it wouldn't be hard to find out with the amount of praise and respect floating around the internet by those who looked up to Nipsey Hussle and drew inspiration from his legacy, not only as a musician, but also as a businessman and community activist. You see, from an early age, Nipsey would learn to adopt a hustling mindset from looking up to his brother and seeing how hard he worked. He would accredit this to seeing his older brother, a teenager, earning his first $1,000 through grinding and hard work on the streets. But there was something about Armias. You see, at the age of just 11, Nipsey would find himself asking to work for a shoe shining company where he would earn $2.50 per job, ending his working days with roughly $100 or more to show for his efforts. Not only this, Hussle would also begin to flip candy during his hours shining shoes to obtain multiple streams of income, a strategy that he had also learned from his brother.
Bro, the first job I had, I shined shoes. I think I was 11, 12 years old. So there was a spot called Chamber Shoe Shine. And I just went in there, I'm like, look, I want to work, man. I'm young, I come every day, I show up early, I need a job. And dude gave me a shot, and I was making like $90 a day. And I worked 6 days a week, and I was selling candy at the shoe shine spot also. Go to the 99-cent store, you get like $3, $4 candy bars. You sell them for $1, you triple up whatever you spend.
The guys at the shoe shine, they didn't mind it.
Nah, they encouraged it. They laughed at me because I was young, but they was like, dude got a hustler spirit, and we gonna support it.
But all this hard work and time at the young age of just 11, but what exactly? Was it to buy a new gaming system? Or was it for like cool accessories that children at that age may be expected to be interested in? No. Armias worked that hard to be able to afford his school clothes so that his financially struggling mother didn't have to deal with the shame of not being able to do so.
And we gonna support it.
Did anybody tell you to go get a job, or you wanted that?
I wanted to buy school clothes. My mom gave me $40 to go school shopping, and I didn't want to make her feel bad, and I knew that's all she had. I'm like, this is not gonna really cut it. I don't want to put no pressure on you and make you feel bad about not being able to look out. The next summer, I'm like, I want to prevent going back to school without what I need.
Yeah.
Now I want you to ask yourself really quickly what it is exactly that you were doing when you were the same age. If I'm gonna keep it real with you guys, my version of hustling was trading Yu-Gi-Oh cards or Pokemon. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. But look, we gotta understand now, right? The environment Hussle grew up in was not an easy one.
Our neighborhood basically go from like Slauson to Florence. A lot of people got killed out here on these streets, right here on 63rd, Victoria, Hyde Park, Bryanhurst. This building right here, we call these the cages. And this where, niggas are go in the back of these buildings and get put on the hood. Niggas would come back here and fight all day. If you wanted to be from this shit, you had to come fight. And if you didn't know nobody and nobody respected you, or you didn't have that motor in you that they wanted to see, you got treated bad back here.
It lacked opportunity in forms of education and financial well-being for the most part, something that I want you to keep in mind for later as we begin to explore Hussle's business ventures. For now though, I just wanted to set the tone for understanding just how serious I am when I say Nipsey Hussle was undoubtedly a hustler. One thing I found abundantly clear about Nipsey is that he's the type of man who refuses to take no for an answer. By any means necessary, this was a person who was willing to do whatever it took to get where he needed. Once he was able to develop a vision, he lived it and died by it, steering clear of any excuses or shortcuts. Demonstrating this greatly was the moment he received an offer by Rick Ross to be signed under his label, Maybach Music Group, or MMG. He'd refused the offer as his vision consisted of ensuring that himself and his team would make it in the industry, and that his team would receive the praise they would deserve. Whereas, in being signed by MMG, would otherwise mean that the label would instead take credit for Hussle's potential takeoff.
Oh, I was gonna do the deal. Is what when Ross put the MMG thing on the table.
Yeah, I got you.
That was just the terms and the way, Ross set up the conversation to start in that building. It was a great opportunity. It was a great situation. I just had a concern with my team getting credit for breaking Nipsey Hussle. So I didn't necessarily want to take that from my team.
Damn.
You know what I mean? But outside of that, I would have took that deal. Even just outside of the terms, just how Ross hustle, I believe in Ross as a hustler. You know what I'm saying? Everything he done said, he done every combo we had, every time I sent a verse, he executed it. So I got a lot of respect for Rose. So I'd have done it off just GP, but I got a team I committed to ahead of time.
Damn.
And I needed to make sure they got the credit for what they did. You know what I mean?
He turned down the safer and basically guaranteed route to success in order to satisfy the intense vision he had for himself and his team. You see, Hustle viewed success as a marathon, not a race. So while it had been hard turning MMG down, he knew that he didn't need the deal to accomplish what he set out to achieve. But even going back earlier into his teen years, Hustle already developed this attitude, more specifically at a time when computers were seen as rare and harder to obtain for the average person, especially in the area and time Nipsey was raised. He would embark on a lengthy financial grind to eventually afford and obtain all parts of the computer he required with hopes of building one. It was something his older brother even believed at the time to be impossible. Doubting Hustle's ability to actually create a PC, he'd become annoyed at the parts that would lay around in the room that they shared.
Come home from school with a backpack full of computer parts. And we shared a room, and we shared bunk beds. I was a little older, OCD. I used to, hey, we cleaning up today. He would get pissed off. Like, you ain't going nowhere, you helping me clean the room. And he brought these computer parts, and I'm like, man, we can't keep these in this room. He like, nah, I'm gonna build a computer. Like, man, if you don't get out of here, man, he's like 12 years old. I'm like, man, a computer back then to me was like rocket scientist.
But Nipsey worked and worked and worked, and he'd eventually gather all the parts necessary to build the damn computer, which he ended up doing. It surprised his brother greatly, just as it did myself when researching and finding out about this. Like, I'm in my mid-20s, and I'd still be struggling to build a PC if I went it alone, This young, at the time, teenage boy did it himself with his own money? There was just something about Amias. I thought extensively with all the information I'd gathered for this project, whether or not to go into detail about Nipsey Hussle's music career. Ultimately, I decided that for that aspect of his life, viewing the extensive Last Lap documentary made by Diverse Mentality on YouTube would be more ideal for you guys, as I wouldn't enjoy just spewing out information that's already been covered by someone who's absolutely done it already, and in an insanely well-detailed manner at that. So the link for that video is in the description below. Be sure to check that out at the end of this video, because the guy's level of detail blew my mind. As for this video, I'd like to touch briefly upon his highlights, or interesting aspects of his musical career, in relativity to the theme of this video so far, that being that there's something about Amias. Look, if you research the entirety of Hustle's music career, there's a lot to unpack. Instead, what I want you to focus on is something that links back to what I said earlier about his refusal to join MMG, and that is his strong desire to pave his own way. Let's rewind back to 2010 for instance. It was an important year for Hustle. You see, from 2005 up to this point, he had been signed to Epic Records. However, once 2010 rolled around, the label would begin to deal with financial issues. This led to Hustle opting out of the contract renewal with the label and ending up with him leaving. What he does next is, in my opinion, the thing that changed the course of his musical career, as well as developed him to become the ever so inspiring musician and role model he had been up until his death. What Nipsey did was found his own record label by the name of All Money In Records, and would go on to release a multitude of projects under this company, essentially being his own boss and doing the music thing his way. Now, of course, we have to make mention that he did have a partnership with Atlantic Records eventually down the line, but he still maintained a lot of control, so it's still his way. It's no secret that Hustle's career was not always smooth sailing in terms of his record sales and the money he would earn. However, he would find financial freedom in his craft. The way he would choose to reinvest the income he was earning was truly something else. This is where the business mindset would begin to flourish. Amias would attempt several times to open up his own store alongside his brother Sam on the lot that they would frequent and would develop memories as children. Every time they tried though, they'd be approached by law enforcement each time, whether it be due to a lack of rights to run the store or by other troubles such as Sam getting in trouble elsewhere, leading to the store being taken down. Eventually, Hustle's brother and himself would end up purchasing and claiming ownership of the lot, and finally opening up the Marathon store for good, an affordable retail store accessible to his struggling area, not in a rich and safe area, but the very place he grew up in. Speaking of a struggling area, that leads me to the next point within this section of the video, Nipsey Hussle's activist mindset. Amias was someone who was undoubtedly not only a leader of his tribe in the ways that he'd influence and inspire aspiring rappers, or gang members, or anyone who listened to his music for that matter. Hustle was also someone who cared deeply for his tribe. He unlike others, whether a part of the hood or not, could see the shining potential beneath the surface of the many disadvantaged people that would live in his hometown. He believed that there was no difference between those who wanted to achieve the things that he did and himself, claiming that what he did could be done by anyone who finds himself in the same position as Nipsey did, when he was not so fortunate with money or opportunity. But you know, we hear this kind of thing all the time from successful people. Who cares, right? Nipsey was just another self-help guru trying to seem humble and give false hope to useless people who could never make it. Well, actually no. This man put his money where his mouth was. When he said he believed anyone could achieve greatness, he meant that shit. How? Take his partnership with David Gross to run a co-work, Vector 90. For those of you who are unaware, a co-work space is a building in which multiple tenants, for example entrepreneurs, startups, or non-profits, rent working space like offices or desks, and have the use of communal facilities. Vector 90 also offered STEM classes to kids on the lower floor in a non-profit form.
And it was his original concept that he brought me in on, but it's basically a science, technology, engineering, and math center on the first level.
And that's STEM acronym.
That's an acronym for STEM.
Yes.
Wow.
And what's important about STEM is that all of the jobs in Silicon Valley require STEM knowledge.
Right.
So if you're gonna go work at Google, Facebook, any one of these billion-dollar companies that have very, very little diversity and that will hire just based on there's not a lot of qualified people.
Skill.
Yeah, that's that come
Skill
from
set.
our ethnic backgrounds. It's important because they saying that there's no pipeline, that these kids got to learn so early that public inner city schools are not training them to go be a part of Silicon Valley. But the other side of it is that it's a WeWork model, and WeWork is basically office space for rent without a lease.
Right.
So if I'm an up and coming entrepreneur, I don't got credit, I don't really have enough to make a full commitment to a 2-3 year lease, I can go in and say I want to rent it for a month or a week.
Yes,
or
sir.
a day. And even on top of that, the other side of it is that if you don't have cash, you can offer hours. If you're a young entrepreneur from the area and you live in the area and you can't afford to rent your office space with cash, you can say, I'll give labor and I'll come work for the operation and I'll come help around the building in whatever way that you are a specialist in, and will prorate your hours based on you giving back time.
This type of co-work space was something that was unheard of in the Crenshaw district before Hustle and David's partnership to develop it. All of a sudden, those with little to no opportunity would end up having an endless amount of it. This beautiful, selfless decision really gives us an idea of the type of stance Hustle had taken as an individual. His focus was rarely on himself in terms of fame and fortune, aside from flexing in the music he made, but hey, let the man enjoy himself, right? He deserved it. But really though, it was more about his vision for not only himself, but those around him. He cared just as much about the people he grew up with as he did for himself. And look, honestly, I could go on and on about how great Nipsey was, because there were so many things that made him an admirable individual and role model, and that's what makes the conclusion of all this so unusual. Everyone that was a fan of Nipsey, as well as you guys watching the video right now, know that he was a skillful, selfless, and giving human that wanted the best for everyone around him, and for those that knew him and followed him as well. He saw the potential in everyone and everything. Instead of thinking the glass was half empty, he saw it as half full. Additionally, Nipsey was at a point in his career and life where he had little to no enemies, at least from his point of view, as he would frequent the same areas he grew up and found himself having fights in. This included The Lot, whereby his store was located, as we mentioned earlier. Hustle was always shown love when visiting his home in the Crenshaw district, but sometimes that love can turn sour and emotions of jealousy or anger can completely take over. One day, Hustle would visit his store as per usual as he had a bit of downtime to spare. He comes across an individual whom he knew very well, and as a close friend as well. Actually. This individual's name was Eric Holder. Hustle and Eric would proceed to have a several-minute conversation, and all seemed well. The two would then part ways with everything appearing to seem normal. That is until Holder returns once again with the firearm and began firing at Hustle. Hermias would then collapse to the ground shortly after and say to Holder, quote, "You got me."
The only thing that was said prior to the shooting is Eric walking in between the two cars, looking at Nipsey and saying, "You're through." And Nipsey, after being shot, responding, "You got it."
Paramedics would later then arrive to the scene and pronounce him as dead. But what happened here? Everyone loved Hustle, right? Even those that didn't know him personally. Yet, here we had his friend, a close one at that, who abruptly ended his future. Nothing about this makes sense. Until, of course, you look into two things. That is, Holder's musical history in comparison to Hustle, as well as the conversation that took place minutes before Hustle's passing. Firstly, when digging into the trial for Holder's murder, we come to learn that Holder was nowhere near as successful in pursuing the same career that Hustle would.
The defendant in this case, Mr. Holder, was was also an aspiring rapper. Not nearly as successful, not nearly as respected. And the two men really didn't have a lot in common.
So in that, we can almost certainly deduce that there was a great deal of jealousy that influenced Holder's actions that day. To add to this though, the conversation the two would have in the lot that day would eventually evolve Hustle claiming that Holder had snitched, or that he heard that he snitched. Why would naming Holder a snitch be a significant factor in the death of Hustle though? That's where we can turn to the court hearing of Nipsey Hussle's death to provide that answer.
One of the things you're going to learn is the concept of respect in gangs. Respect is everything, reputation is everything. It's a different play on respect than you're used to. Kind of a perverse definition of respect. But it is important to them. A lot of blood has been shed, not only in that gang, but in gangs across the county over this concept of respect. It is very, very real to them. They take it very seriously. There was a conversation between Mr. Holder and Mr. Askedam minutes before Mr. Holder shot and killed Mr. Askedam. That conversation had something to do with snitching. If a gang member is considered a snitch, it's a whole lot different from being considered a snitch by your little brother or your little sister. There's a range of consequences for people who snitch. But no gang member wants to be considered a snitch. It is highly offensive to any gang member to even be suggested that he is a snitch.
So there you have it. There were two main motives for the killing of Hustle in this instance. The first would have been Holder's similarity in goals, music-wise, as well as the fact that he was accused of being labeled a snitch by Hustle, which we've just learned that when being involved in a gang that the two are a part of, it's a big deal, and a huge disrespect to one's reputation. Now obviously, I want to make it clear that while we have listed potential motives behind the killing of Hustle, by no means does it justify the actions that took place that day, whatsoever. In fact, even if we were to forget for a moment that these two individuals were close friends, and that they were strangers to one another, it would still remain unjustified, in my opinion, and in most people's opinion, I would assume. This goes without saying, but I'd like to just make it clear that that's how I feel, and this section is not to provide validity to the reasons for Holder's choices, it's just to list what his motives were. Either way, what happened that day has happened, and there's no turning back, unfortunately. But just because Hustle is no longer with us physically, doesn't mean the marathon has to end there. He still lives on with us spiritually, and through his impact on our lives, both those close to him, as well as us who are on the other side of the planet, yet still affected in some way, usually positively. One sad thing about Nipsey's death is that his music really saw a steep upward slope in popularity once he passed. While it is unfortunate that he was no longer alive to receive this boost in recognition and popularity, I think it's safe to say that he saw it coming either way while he was still with us. Hustle's ambitions, his dreams, his vision, were all too strong for him to believe that he wouldn't become well known and impact millions of lives in their own respective ways. Let's not forget to mention his work ethic, which was fueling these things. He was unstoppable. Heck, he's no longer with us, yet he still continues to make a difference in this world. This is truly remarkable to me and highly worth taking a moment to appreciate, in my opinion.